We all have things we are nostalgic for from our younger days. It could be just about anything from a movie you watched as a kid, music you heard as a teenager, or even video games that you grew up playing along with your friends and family. For me, I have a lot of nostalgia, for example in the Star Wars and Lord of the Rings movies, music such as Viva La Vida by Coldplay and Legend of the Eternal Wind by Nobuo Uematsu, and for video games such as Pokemon Silver on the Game Boy, the Ratchet & Clank games on the PlayStation 2, and the Final Fantasy III remake on the DS. The footage I use from the Final Fantasy III is from the Final Fantasy III remaster, not the remakes. Just kind of deal with that, okay? When it comes to nostalgia for things such as video games, there are times where we as consumers might want to relive it by playing through it again. However, when it comes to doing so, we have two different ways we can do it. There are emulators for doing so, and this also allows us to utilize some nice quality of life changes, such as save states, improving the resolution and quality to a higher one to make the game look better, more controller support so you can use whatever controller you are most comfortable with instead of just the controller for the console which the original game was released with, and more. The other way is of course to play on the original console or consoles, which the game was playable on, as some consoles are backwards compatible. In 2020, I sold most of my physical games for games I grew up with, such as my copies of Pokemon Pearl, Pokemon Heart Gold, Pokemon Emerald, and more, which I at the time did not mind as I at the time preferred emulating games. However, I now realize that this is one of my greatest mistakes, as I have over time realized that playing the games on original hardware is much more satisfying than emulating them, as a part of what makes games so great is the era which they come from. I'll get more into detail why in a bit. However, before we get further into the video, I would like to say that I want to try and get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, which I know is a big ask, but if we do manage to get there, I will host a 24-hour live stream with some fun content for y'all. I'll go into more detail about this at the end of the video. Now let's get back to the main topic. It all started with a purchase I made last year. You see, my brother and I have for almost 10 years talked about getting a GameCube, as it would be fun to have the ability to play some of the great games from the GameCube. Especially games like Mario Party, Super Smash Bros. Melee, and Mario Kart Double Dash in social settings. Especially since some of these games are some of the best from their respective franchises. Sure, I have a Switch with Mario Party and Smash Ultimate, but I just don't find modern day Mario Party to be as enjoyable. And few things are as satisfying as getting a sick combo thanks to the good movement and fast-paced action we get in Super Smash Bros. Melee, which you just can't do to the same extent in Ultimate. Whilst I have emulated games like Super Smash Bros. Melee, it just isn't the same as playing on GameCube in front of a CRT TV in a room with a group of friends. This made me decide in 2023 that if I ever get the opportunity to get a cheap GameCube that was either white or orange, as those are my favorite colors of the console, I would take it and make the purchase. I later learned that the orange one was out of the question as it was exclusive to Japan, and as I live in Europe, that would mean that the games I would buy here wouldn't work in it, as the GameCube consoles are region locked. However, I could still get a white one, or I could find a Wii if I found one for really cheap, but I would prefer a GameCube. In June of 2024, my friends from Mikkeli, Finland, would introduce me to a local flea market they had, as I asked them to look out for a white GameCube or a cheap Wii. Just about 2 minutes or so later, as if scripted, one of my friends goes, "Gabe, that is a white GameCube in the original box." It was missing the controller, but everything else was there, and as I had a controller from competing in Smash, I felt like that wasn't a worry and I could buy more controllers, so I made the purchase. For only 40 euros, which is about $47, I picked up a white GameCube in the original box. And my first game for the console was Super Mario Sunshine, which I purchased for 25 euros, which is just shy of $30. After getting the GameCube to my home in Stockholm, Sweden, I invited some friends over as we booted up and played on the GameCube for the first time, and all of a sudden I was hooked and I realized I wanted to go back there next year to see what they would have in store then. About a month later I picked up a copy of Pokemon Colosseum, and another month later I picked up 3 more controllers from Japan, a white one, an emerald one, and an orange one. A few months went by without me making any major retro game purchases due to moving out into my own apartment and also in having to get things for said apartment. However, in December my brother sent me a Facebook link for a gaming market that would be at my local convention center, so I along with my friends went there. While there I found a game for cheap that I wanted to pick up for a while, called The Last Story. However, there was just one issue. I didn't have a Wii, and it's a Wii game. The vendor and I struck a deal which allowed me to get a Wii and the console for a great bundle price, and so I bought it. Later on in January, there was another gaming market near me, and so we went once again to check it out. This time I bought some Pokemon cards as I was getting into playing the TCG, as well as a copy of Pokemon Silver as I have a fully functional Game Boy Color at home, which was my first ever console that I got. Looking at the very dark Game Boy Color screen got tiring though, and I realized I needed a backlit screen, so I started looking at other consoles. I decided to order Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire from Japan, as it is far cheaper and not overpriced like English copies of the games, and as someone who did not speak English as a kid, playing the games again in a language I do not know is not really an issue for me. I then a day later found an auction for a modded Game Boy Advance with an IPS display for just 70 euros, so I bid on it. I won the auction at just 76 euros, which is just shy of $90 US. With that, I also decided to order a copy of Pokemon White. I mean, come on, don't act surprised if you know me. I have an entire group channel where we make Pokemon videos, and it is what I grew up with. So that's kind of why I've been buying those games. With that, I thought it would be the end of retro game purchasing for a bit, as this was in May of 2025 and the Nintendo Switch 2 was just around the corner, which was going to be an expensive investment. Then at the end of June, after getting paid, I started looking at Japanese games at auctions again. I was looking at picking up Final Fantasy VI in the original box for the Game Boy Advance, as it is a game I have recently fallen in love with from playing it using the Pixel Remaster iteration of the game. Then I found something really intriguing, a copy of Pokemon Fire Red in the original box with everything, including the wireless adapter in the box, and the auction was just 30 euros. I made bids for it as it was a really good price and won it for just 40 euros, which is around $47 US. With this, I also purchased a copy of Leaf Green, a box copy of Pokemon White 2, and a box copy of Pokemon Platinum. With these purchases, I decided to chill unless I found an amazing deal before making any other purchases from Japan, as I was heading to Finland to visit friends and family, and so I knew that I was gonna go to Mikkeli, and the same flea market that I found the GameCube at. However, just 2 days before heading to Mikkeli, I decided out of boredom to check if there were any interesting auctions about to end, and that is when I found an incredibly nice auction. The auction was for a box Game Boy Advance SP, which was really nice as I wanted one. However, it wasn't the color I wanted, as I wanted one with the same color of the one my brother had as a kid, and so I wouldn't have gone for it if it wasn't for one thing. Along with the Game Boy, there was also a box copy of Pokemon Emerald, and looking at the auction price, it was about to end in 15 minutes at 95 euros. And so I sat there, made a bid, and waited. I won the Game Boy and Pokemon Emerald at just 103 euros, which is around 121 US. The crazy thing is that just a box copy of Pokemon Emerald can be hard to get for under 80 euros. And the same goes for a boxed Game Boy Advance SP. With all of that, there was one last thing for my trip to Finland before going back home. The trip to the flea market in Mikkeli. So I kind of wrote the last part of the script prior to going to Mikkeli. I found nothing. Yeah, don't mind me. I'll just show myself out after setting it up as such a good place. That aside, I did buy a copy of Assassin's Creed and Uncharted 2 whilst at a different store in Finland for a total of 9 euros, which is just shy of $11 US, which was nice as both games individually in secondhand stores, at least retro game stores in Sweden, go for about $15 US each. And I want to play both, as I never have. I also then finally ended up ordering a box copy of Final Fantasy VI for the GBA from Japan. I had been eyeing it for a while, but I still hadn't bought it quite yet, so I decided to do so, especially since the Final Fantasy franchise has a very special place in my heart as being one of the first video game franchises I actually played and really enjoyed. Whilst there are more games I have looked at, that is where I am currently. Yeah, there are a lot of Pokemon games that I bought, but this all started with me wanting to relive my memories from playing games that I loved on their actual consoles. And I played Pokemon non-stop as a kid, so I decided that I want to get all the main series Pokemon games. With that being said, I don't think you guys will be surprised to hear me say that whilst emulators are great, they are nothing like playing on the original hardware. Sure, the resolution is worse and there are less customization options and controller compatibility, however, that is part of the charm. There is something charming about playing games like Pokemon Colosseum in 480p on my GameCube, or having a Game Boy in hand playing Pokemon and trading with my brother, and comboing my friends in Super Smash Bros. Melee on a CRT TV. There's nothing like playing games on the original hardware with the controller and copy of the game you are playing. The footage you are watching right now is footage of me playing the game through my GameCube. And I am really happy that I can say that. There are still some things I'd like to get, such as a Game Boy player, so that I can stream and record when playing Game Boy games through my GameCube. I have done this in the past and it was really cool, so I'd like to do it again whenever possible. I have played a fair amount of games on emulators, and whilst it can be fun, it just isn't the same thing. Some people prefer being able to upscale the quality and sometimes even change the game speed, use game states and more, but I personally really like playing on the original hardware. I can understand fully why some people might want to buy retro games as they can get very expensive, but I personally think it is really cool. And so I'll probably keep collecting them and probably find ways to use them in videos like this one in the future to show you guys them. With all of this said, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Now let me talk a bit about the live stream I mentioned earlier in the video. It will be a 24-hour live stream during which I will be playing some games. I would like to try and play some games with you viewers if I can get it set up properly. Games such as Among Us could be really fun to play with viewers, at least in my opinion. I'll also try and set it up so that we can have a 3 Goons recording session of some kind, if I can schedule it to work, so that you also can see what it looks like behind the scenes, as well as an actual recording of one of the videos for this channel and more. I think some of you guys might actually enjoy seeing a bit more about what things look like behind the scenes, but it's hard to say for now. It all comes down to what I can schedule and what I can prepare ahead of the stream. So let's try and get to 1,000 subscribers so that we can have a 24 hours live stream event. With all of that said, I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.